Redshift here, doing my part to shift perceptions out of the pink and into the red. There's nothing wrong with men liking strong women, but it depends how you define strong. Feminism defines strong as being willful and independent and non-submissive and independent thinking and career-oriented and sexually liberated, aka promiscuous, etc. This is not real strength, and even if it is, it's an evil kind of strength. It's a kind of strength that benefits top men but harms the rest of men, and most of women. It benefits the top 1% of men or less, at least, and definitely benefits no more than the top 10 or 15% of men, and it harms the rest of men. So and therefore harms the rest of women, because, the rest of women want to marry those men and get kids, but, they can't, because a lot of those guys are now, not living very good lives. They can't support a child, or they can only support one child, and so he's not desirable. So then, it's like this harms a lot of women too by forcing a lot of women to not be able to find a husband, right? But that's just one aspect of it. I mean, it destroys women's souls, it makes them miserable, it makes them unable to, be led by men, even though men are wiser than women. So, women are constantly doing what's, in their own worst interest, and they're constantly in conflict with their man, even though he's right, and it'd be better for her and him if they did what he wanted. But she refuses to accept it because she can't see that he's wiser, because, if you're wiser, the other person is not as wise, and then if the other person's not as wise, they can't see that you're wiser. You know what I mean? It's like, how are you going to convince women to, understand what you're saying when they don't understand? The only way to do it is to get them to be submissive and just obey blindly, right? But feminism gets women to not do that, so it's destructive to women as well. It's destructive to basically all relationships to make women independent, right? So not financially independent, but like, mentally, emotionally independent, right? So she doesn't listen to her man. So, while there's nothing wrong with liking strong women, and women should be strong in a different way. Women should be strong in a moral way, and in a feminine way. Women should be strong enough to be open-minded enough to listen to their man and trust him. They should be strong enough to be quiet, strong enough to follow their man, trust him, and believe in him. Women should be strong enough to be sexually restrained. Women should be strong enough to have kids and not be hedonistic and be like, I don't want kids, or I only want one kid, or I don't know if I want kids. That's what women are like today. Women of the past wanted kids, and they understood that, raising kids is not so easy, but, they were loving people who had intact souls, and they understood that was their role, and it was what they were suited for. They didn't just do it because it was what they were suited for, though, but because because they're suited for it by evolution, they wanted to do it. And they were good at it, right? So women had kids, and it was just a natural fit for them, and it made them happy, which is why, stay-at-home mothers were happier than any other profession. Women were happier than men back in the past, 1950s and earlier, right? Like, women should be strong enough to be able to be forbearing and endure men's frustration and anger or whatever, which he might occasionally take out on her, even though she doesn't deserve it under traditionalism. But, then under traditionalism, because men are in charge and men are moral, the society will be moral, and then he'll, have a sense of conscience, and then he'll apologize if he takes his anger or frustration out on her when she didn't deserve it, right? He's just frustrated with his job or whatever, right? Like, women should be like that. They should be forbearing. They used to be forbearing. Women should be strong enough to be forbearing and restrained and loving and trusting. Women should also be strong enough to believe in freedom and not believe in government. And if you object and say the women will never not believe in government because it's the ultimate alpha, and their instinct is to submit to the alpha, well, then I will say that men need to be wise enough and brave enough to not believe in government, because if women are not going to do it, then it's up to men. And also, if women cannot not believe in government, if they're always going to believe in government because of their tendency to submit to the alpha, then that's admitting that women need to submit to a greater authority, and therefore that men need to force women to submit to them instead of to government, and women need to be strong enough to accept that it is in their nature to submit to men, and then women need to be strong enough to be submissive and obey their father, and later when they get married, they need to be strong enough to obey their husband, right? Being loving and patient and obedient, that is real strength if you're a woman. That is moral strength. That is feminine strength. It's moral strength to keep your legs closed until your wedding night, even if that means never losing your virginity because of you not being able to find a husband. That's how it was in the past. It's moral strength to trust and believe and follow your husband, to not doubt him, and to not fear what he wants to do, such as saving in sound money like gold instead of saving dollars in a bank. Women should be strong enough to be forbearing. not yell at their man when he yells at her. Like, this is moral strength. This is feminine strength. Women should be strong in all those kinds of ways, and probably more things that I didn't mention. But that kind of strength, that is strength, and that's feminine strength, and it's a moral kind of strength, and that's the strength that women used to have. And that's the strength that women should be encouraged and incentivized to once again have. Women should be incentivized and encouraged to once again have that strength and give up this quote-unquote feminist strength, which is actually a brittle form of strength. Feminist strength is a brittle, short-sighted, selfish, unnatural, destructive kind of strength. Real feminine strength is malleable and is unbreakable. Feminist strength is masculine and unattractive. You know, that's how feminists are. They're very masculine and they're strong in a masculine kind of way, but they're weak in a feminine kind of way. They don't have feminine strength, you know? They don't have the strength of malleability or patience or forbearingness or anything like that. You know, forbearance. You know, like, feminist strength is masculine and unattractive, and it's conducive to arguments and bad relationships. It's conducive to wasting your fertile years and then not being able to have kids or being rushed to marry a guy who you don't really love because you're losing your looks. This feminist strength is actually weakness and immorality, such as promiscuity, female promiscuity. This is also quote unquote feminist strength. And in a sense it's strength, but not in a real sense. Not in a happiness-inducing sense or a peacefulness-inducing sense. Not in a long-term sense. Not in a salubriousness sense. And not in a functionality of society sense. It's more strength. Feminist strength is more strength in a, like, fuck the world, I'm going to take advantage of other people and do whatever I can to make myself happy, stronger, not happier, but stronger and richer and more powerful no matter what. Even if it destroys my soul, even if it destroys all the people around me, I'm just going to get more strong. You know, I'm going to increase my leverage no matter what. That's what this feminist strength is. Feminist strength and feminine strength are very, very, very different. They're basically the exact opposites of each other. And I think one of the reasons they've promoted and continue to promote promiscuity and toleration of single motherhood and stuff like that is because with single motherhood, the elites can permanently lower male SMV, and women too, you know, like, I think they sort of realize that, like, they can lower men's SMV by being promiscuous and normalizing single motherhood and stuff. Although not permanently, but like for a whole generation, like 20 years, they can do it. They can lower the SMV of men. Because if a woman is a slut and she accidentally gets pregnant out of wedlock, like a white woman sleeping around, and she gets pregnant by a guy of another race, well, now she's got this, you know, half non-white baby, and then that white guy is going to marry her. And then is a white guy going to marry her and have kids with her when she has a kid that's like half not white, that doesn't even look white? Like, no white guy with any self-respect is going to marry a girl who's not only a single mother, but her kid is not even white. Right? Like, but what if the wandering tribe, through their promotion of miscegenation and men cowardly going MGTOW instead of fighting for women, for freedom, and peace and prosperity and all the other good things that come with freedom, and to get their own race as women back, and to forbid the women of their own race from sleeping with men of other races? Like, you know, what self-respecting white guy is going to marry a girl who has a kid by a guy of another race? So, because of men going MGTOW and cowardly refusing to re-enslave women, cowardly refusing to force women to stick to men of their own race, refusing to overthrow the government by force, etc. You know, when men are cowardly refusing to do these important things, like overthrow the government and force women to stick to men of their own race and force women to keep their legs closed until marriage as well, right? Like, when men are cowardly refusing to do these things, the elites, the wandering tribe and the other elites, you know, they could actually, over the next 10 to 20 years, like, what if they got 20 to 30% of white women pregnant by men of other races? Boom, automatically, no matter how much you turn the culture around at that point, in like 5 years after that, let's say, with like, you know, let's say the MGTOW Mirror comes out and Zeitgeist Eater turns it into a new YouTube, and within 5 years it has grown huge, and it's the new YouTube, and everybody's using it, and it's impossible to censor, and the government can't take it down, and everybody is, you know, getting super red-pilled, and culture is completely turning around. Like, it would still, and everybody knows about the JQ, and everybody knows and believes in it, and everybody, you know, understands why feminism is bad, and all women know about the bad effects of promiscuity, and everybody knows about false flags, and about the Holocaust being a hoax and all that stuff. Like, what if that were to happen in just like 5 years after 20 to 30% of women have had children by men who are not white, right? And decided to keep those kids. Like, what happens? Like, it doesn't change anything, no matter, even if they're everybody's super red pilled, because still 20 to 30% of those women are still permanently ruined. And there are fewer white women out there for those white guys with self-respect to marry. Those white women are ruined from premarital sex, not only because they're single mothers, but because they're doubly ruined because they have a kid who's not even, well, they're triply ruined, actually. They're triply ruined because, number one, they're not a virgin. Number two, they're a single mother. And number three, they have a kid or more kids who are not even white. They're only half white, right? Like, what self-respecting guy is going to raise not only another man's baby, but another man's baby when that baby is not even his own race, but is half a member of another race that hates his race? Right? Like, if you raise a mulatto baby, you're basically, doing something that's like against your own race's interest. Because, people that are not white, especially people in ghettos and stuff, like, they hate white people for no reason, really. They think the white people are the devil. They think, the white people enslaved them and they're poor because of white people and all that. But that's not even true. So it's ridiculous. But like, so if you raise a mulatto baby, you're assisting basically in the suicide of your own race because, this race hates you. Like, why would you raise a baby that's half the race of a race that hates you? That makes no sense, right? Like, who would do that, right? And not only is the baby not white, but the baby has, less intelligence than it should, such as if, the father were white as well, right? So instead of a 100 IQ, it's got like a 92 or a 93. What self-respecting white guy would marry that girl, even if she had good moral character and were very beautiful? No self-respecting white guy is going to do that. So boom, automatically the propagandists have ruined 20 to 30% of women. Once 20 to 30% of women have had children by men that are not white. Right, like 20 to 30% of white women having children by men who are not white, who they're not even married to. Right, like they're just... like they got pregnant out of wedlock and now they're not even together with the guy anymore, right? So then these women don't have white babies because they can't get a white man because no white man wants them, right? So then the white population doesn't increase, and maybe those women even have more babies by men of other races because those are the only men they can get at that point, right? So now the woman is miscegenating even more because white guys with self-respect won't marry her and won't have kids with her, won't give her white babies, and she's not smart enough to have kids with white sperm bank sperm, or can't afford to do so, or is legally disincentivized from having kids by white sperm bank sperm babies, or Jewish sperm bank sperm, because, any high IQ sperm from a sperm bank, right? Like, she's disincentivized from doing that, I think, because I think you cannot get on, I could be wrong, but I don't think you can get on welfare if you get pregnant by sperm bank sperm, right? And it definitely means you can't get child support, so then what's the effect of all this? Because she can't do that, she can't have high IQ kids by sperm bank sperm, so then she just keeps getting knocked up by low IQ guys who have jobs, right? And then so she can put them on child support, right? But that just means a whole generation of stupid people. Unlike, if she had been incentivized by the government to have kids with sperm bank sperm, then that would have been at least a whole generation that was way smarter, right? And more dumb people means more tyranny, because they're going to vote, they're not going to believe in anarcho-capitalism, they're going to fall for the lies of the politicians, etc., because they're dumb, right? And so, you get a bunch of low IQ kids in the country, and then that just increases tyranny and even more, and then you become a one-party country. We become a country that's, repealed the Second Amendment, no longer believes in the First Amendment, Republicans never get elected anymore, only Democrats, etc. That's the kind of country you get from a bunch of miscegenation, right? And it's going to lower the IQ of the whole entire country when 20 to 30% of white women are having kids from men of other races. Plus, it vastly decreases the number of white babies being born, period. So then, they're outbreeding us as well eventually, especially like, the Middle Easterners and stuff, right? And the Latinos. Plus it normalizes the whole thing of being half white. And then because they're half white, if you're a white guy and you grew up with this like half white friend, then you're going to be less opposed to miscegenation, and then you're going to be more open to the idea of marrying a half white woman, or even a woman who isn't white at all, like a Middle Eastern woman or a Latino woman. And then, maybe she's good looking, like a lot of Latino women are. A lot of Latino women are good looking, but the issue regarding intelligence is a huge problem. And you can't marry a Latino woman, her intelligence is just not sufficient. Even if you were doing the eugenic breeding thing with sperm bank sperm in a commune, the reversion to the racial average, the reversion to the racial mean will result in her sperm bank sperm kids being lower in IQ than they would have been if she were white, even if she is a Latino woman with an above average IQ, like 100, right? Her kids will still be lower in intelligence because of the reversion to the racial mean. So it would hold back the progress of the eugenic breeding in the commune if the women were not white or Asian or Jewish, but were instead of other races, right? The more miscegenation that happens, the more it normalizes it, and then that normalization makes miscegenation happen even more. And then you get a whole next generation of miscegenation after that, and then even more white women will be having kids with men of other races, thus decreasing whites even more. And then that encourages even more miscegenation, both in the sense of normalizing it and in the sense of incentivizing it, because the male sex drive needs an outlet, so men will be getting married to get sex, just like men always have. It's the social contract that all of human civilization is based on. And so because men need to have sex, if there are a lot of white guys out there, but not enough white women out there for those guys to marry, there's just a bunch of half-white women out there, then those guys need to get laid. So those guys are going to marry or date and have sex with those women and eventually probably have kids with those women. So that basically forces those white guys to miscegenate because there's not enough white women out there for all the white men to marry, especially since the white men are more viable later on. Whereas, so it's like you got the white guys who are like in their 30s or 40s marrying the girls who are like in their late teens or early 20s, who are the whole next generation, which is even more miscegenated. And so therefore you have a bunch of white guys who are looking for white wives among a population that has not enough white women for them. And then the promiscuity problem taking up more than their fair share, way, way, way more, that makes the problem way, way, way worse, right? Basically forcing those white guys who are in their 30s or 40s to marry these, half-white women in their late teens or 20s, 18 to 23, let's say, right? In 40 years, it could be the case that whites are only 20% of the population and are outnumbered by half-white and three-quarters white people. The kids of miscegenation and the kids whose parents are one white parent and one half-white parent. But who knows? Maybe it won't be quite as destructive as I think, because maybe the half-white girls being born today will, in 20 years, be seeking a husband and will find white guys to be very desirable because of her being hypergamous. So maybe then incel guys of today will be able to marry and have kids with those half-white girls. White incel guys who could not have gotten women otherwise. I'm not sure if the hypergamous instincts of those women will cause them to prefer white incel guys, thus making sure that white guys breed more, or whether it'll be a case of the lower IQs of those half-white women making it so that they're stupider and shallower, and they don't even want incel white guys, but instead want dumber guys than themselves. Guys who are half-white and are more aggressive and more charming and better looking. Right? I'm not sure what'll win out, right? Like the masculinity of the other guys or the, intelligence issue. I'm not sure which it will be. Whether women's instinct to submit to a good-looking and masculine guy will win out, or whether women's hypergamous instincts will win out. I'm not sure. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Waiting and seeing and doing nothing is not good, but, you should be doing your own thing, like forming your own ANCAP country or your own commune or something, and then, just observe from a distance to see what everyone else is doing, how America goes to hell and collapses, because it is going to hell and it is collapsing, but exactly how it happens is going to be something we'll have to wait and see. But you should be saving yourself and setting the precedent for freedom and prosperity in the future by forming your own communes and stuff, not just standing around to see what happens in America, because you don't want what is going to happen to affect you, that's for sure, right? So, like I said, I'm not sure if this whole thing will make it so that incels will be able to get women in 20 years, or whether it'll not happen, and the destructive effect will be just as bad as anyone can imagine. With a huge amount of miscegenation and a massive lowering of intelligence, and thus a massive control and massive increase in power of the tyrannical government and the Democratic Party and all that. So we're just going to have to see, I guess. You may think that it's fine if those white incels don't breed, not even in 20 years with women who are half-white, but just because the kids will be more physically attractive if those white women marry, those half-white women marry and have kids with less intelligent but physically more attractive men who are only half-white, those kids being more physically attractive is not as important as those kids being smart. Physical attractiveness is good, but it's not nearly as important as intelligence, especially these days. Some guys are intelligent but are still incels because they're ugly. In terms of societal stability, low crime rate, speed of technological development, etc., it's better if those ugly but smart incels breed than if the more attractive but less intelligent half-white men breed. So if an incel is smarter, then nearly all guys who are half-white. Sorry, if an incel is smarter than most guys who are only half-white, but is not smart enough to make good money, and when society is gynocentric and thus women are incentivized to be shallow and choose men on their looks more than on the man's character, this means it will likely be the case that women will be pursuing guys based on their looks instead of on their intelligence, although perhaps I'm wrong, because perhaps those incels will be able to breed because of them being poor, but not as poor as half-white guys will be. Soon, in 30 to 50 years, the 99% will be so impoverished that women will be choosing guys based on degrees of poverty, not on degrees of wealth, right? Because like when 99% of guys are poor, then women aren't judging guys on how rich they are, they're judging them on how poor they are. Like, it's just like women are more attracted to guys who are less poor. Like everybody's poor, but as long as he's not like super, super, super poor, like she's attracted to him. Well, that's probably what is going to happen, because everybody's going to get way, 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 way poorer, except for the guys at the very top, the top 1% or the top 5% of men or whatever, right? So then it'll be a case of women having to choose. She'll be trying to get a guy who's least poor, because the only men she'll be able to hook up with will be poor guys. So then it will just be a case of a woman having to decide between white poor guys on the basis of looks and on the basis of charm and on the basis of intelligence and on the basis of how poor he is. Is he super poor or is he just kind of poor? And not as poor as most guys that she can hook. Right, like a standard of living decreases, women's standards will be forced to go down as well, and women will have to choose between whether she chooses a guy for intelligence or whether she chooses a guy for masculinity and charm and looks and also on intelligence and stuff like this, right? Like it's going to get weird. It's going to get weird, but that's how it is. Women's standards adjust as they have to, right? Just like their behavior adjusts as it's forced to, whether by men or by government or whatever. It's also warring between hypergamy and own group preference as well. I heard on someone's video that half-white people tend to marry white people, so maybe hypergamy is stronger than own group preference. But I'll bet that at least in a certain percentage of half-white people, even if it's only in 20% of them, those half-white people will be choosing to breed with either other half-white people or with people of the race that they are that is not white. Like mulatto girls choosing to marry African-American guys because of her strong own group preference for her own race and her identifying as black even though she's only half black, right? Like Halsey, right? Or Halsey, I think she pronounces her name, that singer. She looks totally white, but she thinks of herself as black. She identifies as black because she's half black, right? Like that will happen, right? Like a lot of these half-white people, kids of the newer generations, will be identifying as black. Right? They'll be acting black, they'll be hanging out with black people, they'll be dating black people, or Latinos or whatever. And so I don't know what percentage of the half white and half other race, half some other race. Like I'm not sure what percentage of those people will be choosing to date, non-white people. But it'll probably be significant, especially since the own group preference of those other races is much stronger than the white own group preference. And I think the only thing that makes a lot of these half-white people date white people is because white people often make more money and have more social status. But, when everybody's poor because of, all the whites who have 100 IQs being unemployable, just like all the people with 85 IQs being unemployable, because in the future you need 115 IQ or 120 IQ or something, and a good memory to make a really good or decent living, and everybody else is super, super poor. Like when that's the case, then there's no longer much of a status or money bump. There's not much of an advantage in terms of status or money to date a white guy. So then a lot of these half-white people will probably be dating people who are not white, right? Because why date a white person when they're not any richer and they don't have the own group preference that other races have, etc. So I think a lot of these people will start identifying with their other race, even though they're only half that other race, right? And this will help breed white people out of existence, right? And as white people go extinct and thus average IQ decreases, it will become the case that there will be more unemployment, and greater unemployment will mean greater crime. And greater crime will mean more violence, more poverty, massive societal instability, lack of trust in society, just absolute insanity, Like it won't even be a country anymore. It'll descend into like, Mad Max type of thing. It'll be crazy. Like the local governments will have no more power anymore. The cops will have no more power anymore. The gangs will be running the cities and stuff. It'll be crazy. It's trust me, it won't be a good thing. I'm not saying that's a good thing. Yeah, it's not. That would be like a bad thing that everybody thinks that anarcho-capitalism will be, but that won't be anarcho-capitalism. That'll be the insanity that comes when you have government incentivizing the stuff that leads to the end of government's downfall. That's not the same as anarcho-capitalism. The chaos that you get when a government collapses is not anarcho-capitalism. It's government doing stupid shit and then collapsing because of the stupid shit it does that leads to that insanity. So you can't blame anarcho-capitalism or say that collapse means that anarcho-capitalism wouldn't work. No, because if we had anarcho-capitalism, there would be no collapse and there would be no insanity like that. You see? And the elites don't even have to try to force people to miscegenate. All they have to do is destigmatize premarital sex and destigmatize miscegenation, and then out-of-wedlock pregnancies and miscegenation will automatically result from the premarital sex. And the premarital sex with men of other races, and then those women's prospects will be lowered by having a baby by a black guy, and then those women will be able to date non-white guys, and then those women will have more babies that are only half white, and then that will greatly decrease the numbers of white people and greatly increase the numbers of mixed-race people. If mixed-race babies are destigmatized, then women who get pregnant by non-white fuck buddies will have the child and will not get an abortion. But if having a mixed-race baby is not destigmatized and remains a shameful thing, then women will still get pregnant with those babies when they're, fucking around with guys of other races because of premarital sex being, destigmatized. But, if having mixed-race babies is still stigmatized, then they'll be more likely to have an abortion or give the baby up for adoption or whatever, and then that will keep white people from going extinct because such a woman will be more likely to get married to a white guy because she's not a single mother, and she's not a single mother with a kid that's not white, which is even a worse form of single mother if you have a non-white kid, if you're a white woman, right? And then marrying a white guy and having white kids means that there will be more white babies being born, and thus white people will not go extinct. And this is our country. This was founded to be a white country. It's totally insane to act like, white people don't deserve a country of their own. That's insane. Right? And thus I hope you can clearly see how destigmatizing mixed-race babies breeds white people out of existence. If mixed-race people want to form a country of their own, great. I got nothing against it. And more power to them. May they be very prosperous and peaceful and happy, and may their country thrive. For real, I'm not being sarcastic. Like, if they want to form their own country, more power to them. I would assist them in forming their own country in terms of like, yeah, let's balkanize the U.S., let them have some of the land and form their own country. And may that country be prosperous, because when other people are prosperous, it has a little bit of a ripple effect on you. When anybody in the world is doing better, this benefits the whole world in an infinitesimally small way. And when a whole country is doing well, it benefits the whole world in a significant to a semi-significant way. At least if that successful country is being successful through, sound money, freedom, etc., instead of being successful like America through predatoriness like the petrodollar, right? So if mixed-race people want to form a country of their own, great. I got nothing against it. And if people want to form a country of their own that is totally diverse and practices miscegenation, hell, go for it. We'll see how it works out. I don't think it's going to work out very well for them, but whatever. They can try it, right? But for them to try to change our country, which is supposed to be a white country and has always been a white country, for them to try to change our white country into a mixed-race country and breed us out of existence in our own country is a very evil and destructive thing to do, and it will massively increase crime and poverty, and it will also massively increase government tyranny, assuming the government doesn't utterly collapse from the lack of tax revenue due to the insanely high percentage of unemployment in the country, due to the huge percentage of people with, intelligence that's only a 92 or 93. Right? But while I'm opposed to it on common sense grounds, racial grounds, and humanitarian grounds, perhaps in the long run, all the miscegenation will be good for the survival and strength of the white race, because only the whites that are smart, that are good-looking, that have good health, and are disciplined and aggressive and own-group preference-oriented, and have strong preference for their own race, only these whites will survive and stay purely white. And so this will make the remaining whites who don't get miscegenated out of existence very strong. This will make those whites a lot stronger than they are now. Much richer, more cohesive. They'll all live together. They'll all support each other, buy from each other, and sell to each other. They'll all build their power together, and they won't share it with anyone else. Very much the way Jewish people don't share their power with anyone else. And this will make them much stronger, and then this will probably be a good thing, in a sense. But of course, the whole country will go to hell because of all the low IQ people in it, because of all the miscegenation. And the country will also go to hell because of all the stupid leadership by the psychotic elites. And they will be leading more, and they'll have more power, and they'll be using it even more stupidly. The psychotic elites will be, because their power will increase as everybody else gets stupider, and thus is less likely to hold them accountable, right? And all the impoverishment, because of how stupid everybody is, that'll get worse, and the elites will be able to get away with lying to the public very easily because people are so stupid, because they're lower in IQ, because of all the miscegenation. So, I would prefer that things stay as they are, rather than whites get much stronger, but much less populated. I would rather things stay like they are, with a lot more whites, and those whites not being stronger, rather than have, fewer whites, but have them be stronger, but have them be living in a hellish country. Although, maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe it'll actually be better. Maybe white people will all form their own little country when there's only 10% of the country left that's white. Then all those whites will go live in the same state, and then they'll form their own country and keep out anybody who's not white. And they'll let any whites in. Like if any Russian people want to leave Russia, or any Canadians want to leave Canada, they can come in and live in the new America that was founded only by white people. But anybody who wants to come in who's not white is not allowed to. Right? Maybe that'll happen, and maybe that'll be good. At least good for those white people who form their own new country that's once again free. Right? What if whites in 30 or 50 or 60 years are only 10% of the population of America? If they don't unite and form their own country, and they're just living in this hellish country that's absolutely racked with poverty and massive crime and stuff because of the unemployment level being horrifically huge. Imagine if 90% of the population were unemployed. Imagine that, right? It would be horrific, right? And those whites would be, if they weren't unified and all living in the same place and keeping everybody else out, they would be suffering all the same effects, but even worse because they're not of the preferred races. And so the other races would have a bias against them. And so the whites would actually be, targets of everybody else. It would be horrible, right? But, that it would probably make them, that hardship would make them stronger, smarter, more own group preference oriented, way more aggressive, way more moral and traditionalist, and that would be good. And then they'd probably group together and form their own country or something. But, they'd still only be a tiny percentage of the population. And so if they didn't get together and protect each other, then they would get overrun by other races, either physically and be killed, or they'd be overrun in terms of voting, right? The Second Amendment would definitely be gone. Even if we only had, 40% of the population be white, the Second Amendment would probably be, marginalized out of existence. They would have little or no power to overthrow the government or form their own country either, if white people were only 10 or 20% of the country. I mean, maybe if everybody else were cowardly and they were just standing back and let the white people overthrow the government, and the white people, every single one of them, millions and millions of them were all hell-bent on overthrowing the government no matter what, then yeah, 10 or 20, sorry, not 10 or 20, 10%, so yeah, 20% of the population would be 60 million people. So if white people were 20% of the population at that point, and every single one of them were hell-bent on destroying the government or dying, and nobody else in the country wanted to get in their way, then yeah, maybe they probably could overthrow the government, probably pretty easily, but that doesn't mean that they would, and it doesn't mean that anybody else would not be opposed to them. You know what I mean? If people think the government's a good idea, no matter how hellish and poverty-stricken and crime-ridden their country is, like dumb people, right? Mexico's not very nice, but yeah, Mexicans are so pro-Mexico, right? As if it's such a great country or something, even though it's terrible, right? Who knows? America could get 10 times, 100 times worse, and then you got all these dumb people in the country because of all the miscegenation for the last, 20 years or something. And then all these people are pro-America, pro the U.S. government, even though things are hellish, so the government could probably get those people to fight all the people who want to overthrow the government. And that would make it way, way harder to overthrow the government, right? So, who knows how it would go, but I think those are some possibilities. And if those white people revolt at that time, then they'd be such a small percentage of the population, and the rest of the country would not be conservative but would be liberal, and there'd be no Second Amendment. So it'd be very difficult for that 10% of white people which remains to form its own country or overthrow the government without the help of other people in the country. Like, how would the white people overthrow the government if the Second Amendment's gone? You know what I mean? The only hope would be to infiltrate and transform the government from the inside out, the way that the wandering tribe does it. But to do that, white people would have to have IQs as high or higher than Jewish people to defeat the Jewish people in their struggle to control all aspects of the U.S. government. To wrest that control away from the wandering tribe is, to do that, for white people to get the government back under their control and no longer under the control of the wandering tribe, the white people would have to have IQs probably significantly higher. And they'd have to have a lot of cunning as well. And probably the only way to do that would be to have a eugenic breeding program. To do breeding where half your kids are from sperm bank sperm so you can raise your commune's IQ generation after generation. And if all white people were doing that, that would be hugely beneficial, right? But even if it were just a large commune of a few 100,000 people doing it, they could get their IQs way higher than that of the wandering tribe, like the average IQ in the commune being 140, and then they would be able to be the new power that controls the government. But without doing eugenics like that, it would be impossible to wrest control of the government away from the Illuminati and the wandering tribe, and thus white people will be utterly enslaved along with the rest of the country. And if those white people violently revolt, then they will be small enough in numbers that it would be easy enough to wipe them out. And they would be more prosperous at that time due to the lower IQs of most everyone else, and thus everyone else would hate them and would be glad to see them wiped out and would either let the government do it or would be happy to help the government wipe the remaining white people out. So avoiding miscegenation is not just a matter of social cohesion and peace and prosperity and other such things. It's also literally a matter of survival of the white race itself. It seems like Russia is the only white nation with its act together that, has a hope of not miscegenating white people out of existence, that doesn't seem interested in miscegenating white people out of existence. Like, it seems like almost all of Europe, except for I think maybe one country, I can't remember which one it is, they're like avoiding all the immigration. They're bringing them in, like processing them, and then moving them on to Germany and other countries. They set up this like legal way of doing it, so it's like still in keeping with the laws or whatever, or the EU or whatever. So they're like they're making England and Germany and all the other countries get destroyed by immigration, but like they're refusing to keep them in their country. So like that one country in Europe, I can't remember which country it is. That country and Russia seem like the only countries that are not interested in destroying the white people in their country, that are actually interested in staying white, In 50 to 70 years, it might very well be the case that the only white people thriving and growing and prospering are Russians and Canadians, Americans, and European whites having miscegenated themselves out of existence for the most part, right? Like Russians and those other people in Europe in that one country might be the only ones who are still white. And everybody else, the Canadians, Americans, and Europeans have all miscegenated themselves out of existence for the most part, and have miscegenated themselves into being minorities in their own countries, and therefore are tyrannically enslaved by all the stupid statists of other races, and by the tyrannical elites, And they'll be enslaved by the stupid statists of other races, and those races typically hate white people, even though white people are the least racist of all races. Like, let's not forget that it was the wandering tribe who did slavery in America for the most part, not whites. And let's not forget that it was white people who got rid of slavery, not Asians, not blacks, not Latinos. It was whites who abolished slavery. And so MGTOW is anti-white because it encourages promiscuity. And promiscuity is a major tool that the elites are using to breed the white race out of existence. I've never much cared about race at all, so don't think that I'm so racist, or that I was raised to be proud of my race or something. I was not raised to be proud of being white at all. It was something that was never even talked about or thought about, right? So I've never cared about race at all until they started pushing miscegenation and all this immigration into Europe, and until they started recently trying to destroy white people. I didn't give a shit about being white, but now I do. Now that we're under attack, and we are being destroyed, I've always cared less about race and miscegenation than other people do. But seeing what's happening, I can't help but talk about these things, and I can't help but become an advocate for my own race, because the wandering tribe is engineering all this to destroy white people, because the wandering tribe hates white people. I never even had a problem with the Wandering Tribe growing up either. I was raised to really like Jewish people. I only have turned against them recently because I learned what their religion is really about and how their race really behaves and how they're all about liberalism and communism and homosexuality and fiat currency and tyranny and destroying white people and all that. Right? Like, that's the only reason I have a problem with Jewish people. But, if a Jewish person is, like, not against white people and is in favor of sound money, like Peter Schiff is, and is honest about the Jewish people and the Jewish religion, like Israel Shahak and Brother Nathaniel are, then I got no problem with those Jewish people. I'm a fan of those Jewish people. The problem is there's not very many people like that in that race. So, that's how it is. This has been Redshift, peace trucks for people who don't care about other people. Not all people who care about other people are good, but all people who don't care about other people are bad, which is a distinction that needs to be made because Silly Sad showed in a comment of his a while ago that he doesn't understand the difference.